stuck. You're just stuck, Okay. Okay. I think we're holding by a Tanur Rabbanan on Daf Ches, Amud Beis. Tanur Rabbanan. I don't see Reb Naftali to tell us exactly. It's in the middle of the page on 8b. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. In the stress of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Sorry. Okay. Also, we'll message Hashem will learn tonight, 2:30. Yeah, probably in this room, wherever they have shiurim. Okay, Tanur Rabbanan, it's taught in a brisa. Evet shehi v'gitay. See, the word get could be used for other documents as well. It doesn't have to be just the Jewish divorce. The get could be used for what's called a deed of manumission. Manumission is when a deed that says that the slave is freed. Yeah, we don't have these documents anymore. It's the slave is released, is emancipated. So let's say a slave brings a document that says in it, Atzmecha v'kasabay. It says in it, Atzmecha v'nechasai k'niyalach. You, referring to the slave, and all my property is acquired to you. So you follow what the owner is doing here. The owner, the owner of the slave, if he's giving all his property, the slave included in that property is also the slave, because the slave is owned. So what happens is that the slave gets all the property and himself simultaneously. He gets that, he acquires himself together with the property and then becomes a free person. So the halach is that atzmai kana, but nechasam like kana. He doesn't acquire the possessions, he only acquires himself. Why would he only acquire himself and not acquire the possessions? Because we're relying on him, on the slave's words to say, I'm going to learn in the next Mishnah that when someone brings a get from overseas, just like by a divorce, if someone brings a get from overseas, he has to say that in front of me it was written, in front of me it was signed. That applies also to a deed of manumission. The slave needs to say that in front of me it was written, in front of me it was signed as well. Exactly the same thing. Now, according to Rabbah, that's an issue of Lishma. Gemara is going to discuss that. According to Rava, it makes perfect sense. We want it to be validated. We want the document to be validated. Rabbah held of Rava anyway. So we need a document. So we're trusting him only with the document that says that he's freed. That's the rule, that just like a woman can bring her own divorce and say that the document was written in front of me, and we trust her, even though she's the one that's validating her own document, which we would never do to a lender that shows up with the document and says, this guy owes me money, and it was written and signed in front of me. We won't trust the lender in such a case. But by a divorce, we do trust the woman to say, I was divorced and I'm signed, and I was there at the writing and signing of it. So too by the slave, we trust the slave to say, I was there at the writing and signing of my manumission, and so he's believed for that. But the only thing, what he's not believed for is that he's validating a document about monetary matters. So what we're seeing over here is that in this document itself, we're able to extract the part that we do accept, which is that he's freed, but we won't trust him for the part of the money because that we don't have any ruling on that he should be believed that he's going to validate a monetary document. Yeah, usually a slave or a woman can't testify. In this case, they're able to know. Okay. So basically it has to do with his belief. We believe him in a monetary case that the document is valid. Can we use him to notarize the document because he's the one that's bringing it, like we did by a get, bringing the get. We'll only do it regarding his freedom, not regarding the money that's coming along with it. Okay. This is a concept called Palginan Dibura. Can we divide the words and extract only the part that we're going to believe and not the other part? That was quick.
Only.
Well,
There's no one ahead
it doesn't take time to like get undressed and go in the water and okay. Iboilu, they have a question. Let's say instead of dividing it into two statements, which was in the case that we had before, you and my possessions are acquired to you. Right, and over here, it's not you and all my possessions. Now it's all my possessions are acquired to you, and it's including him, right? But over here, it's only one statement. Over there, it was easier to divide because we had two parts to that statement. Over here, it's all one statement. Mao, what's the din? Can you divide even a statement like that? Can we say that in all his possessions, we have two parts to it? We have him, and we also have the possessions. So can we divide it up like that and say that he should be freed, even though he won't get the possessions? Amar Abaya. Abaya says, in such a case, we're actually going to trust him over the possessions. When he says that in front of me the document was written, in front of me the document was signed, and we trust that regarding that his own freedom, we're also going to trust it regarding the possessions he's going to acquire. Amalei Rava says, I can accept the fact that he can acquire himself when he says, this is a valid document. Well, that's the same thing that applies by a divorce, that we trust that. But he can't acquire the possessions because we never trust a slave to come and say that, or even one person, doesn't have to be a slave, so one person to say on a monetary document that I recognize signatures and to validate it, to notarize it, or a statement of one person. How can that work? Other Amar Abaya, so Abaya retracts. He says, whatever the case is, Abaya is not going for the dividing this up. Abaya is saying, if he does, then it's everything. If he doesn't, then it's everything. Abaya now says, okay, so he doesn't acquire the possessions. So he also doesn't acquire himself. So he's not freed. He's still considered a slave. He has a document that wasn't validated because it's coming from overseas. Amalei Rava says, Rava says the same argument back. Says, I get it what you mean that he shouldn't acquire the possessions. Fine. He did have a Kiem Stars to Alma. That's how it works by all validating documents. So you can't trust the person that's bringing it. He's just one individual. Ela Atzmai. But regarding himself, Liknei, that he should be trusted to acquire. He did have a get isha, just like we see by a woman who brings her own divorce from overseas. The husband gives her a document and says, when you reach Israel, I want you to be divorced with this document. So she comes into the Beis Din and she says, I was there at the writing and signing of this document, and now I want to be divorced with it. So when we trust her over there, so too we should trust this person. Elam Rava, so Rava says, whether it's the case where he says it all in the same expression, or whether it's the case that he says it in two expressions would be, you and my possessions are acquired to you. That's a good name for a slave. Do we have any famous slaves from America? Who was the first guy that was shot in the Revolutionary War? Wasn't that a slave? Wasn't it? It was like that's how it started. The first shot, wasn't there? Like
a shot around the world.
Shot around the world was World War I.
British guy. No.
Is that what it's called? Was there an expression, the shot around the world?
The shot that was heard around the world.
Shot that was heard
Oh,
around
I
the
thought
world.
it was the shout.
Was that the
British are
Revolutionary
coming
War?
The Revolutionary War was the white farmers against the white soldiers
Uh-huh.
from Britain.
Uh-huh.
It's called freedom for the whole world.
Uh-huh. Okay, whatever the case is,
We still need a name.
we still need a name.
Slaves.
What was it? Roots? What?
Oh, Roots was Lamar.
Lamar.
Lamar Burns was the actor that played the slave.
Uh-huh.
LeVar.
Uh-huh. It's okay. Naftali's not here to correct us.
I just remember.
So Rav is going to say that that he acquires himself, but he doesn't acquire the possessions. Okay, that's Rav's way. Rav does this. He says whether it's the same statement, whether it's two separate statements, we can divide it up. That's the rule that Rav is going to follow. Again, the expression here is called Halginan Dibura. Plag means to divide, like Plaga Mincha means you divide the time of Mincha in half. So I think in modern there's an area called Fallujah. Is that a city in Iraq? There's a lot of fighting over there. Fallujah. It's a city that's divided by a river. So the word palag means to divide or argue. So palgina dibura means we split up the words. We'll accept half of it and not accept the other half. Amalei Ravada Bar Masna le Rava. Ravada Bar Masna says to Rava that you're saying that you can divide up the statements. Come on, who are you following like? Reb Shimon. You're following Reb Shimon. Damar Palgin and Dibura says that the statements could be divided. But what he's going to say, Ravada Bar Masna is going to say, is that we have a machlekes. Reb Shimon actually holds like you. The only thing is, the halacha is not like Reb Shimon, and that's what's going to come out. But first you have to say the machlekes, and then so it goes like this. The Tanana there's a Mishnah. This Mishnah of all places is in Peah. If someone writes all his possessions to his slave, so basically he's trying to set his slave free if he's giving him possession. Usually what a slave owns, the master owns. If you're giving something to the slave, sounds like you're setting him free or else he can't own it. Right? So, if he gives him all his possessions, then the slave goes free automatically. But shir karka kulshu. Let's say he doesn't give him all his possessions. He leaves over land. He says, I'll give you everything but this property or these possessions. Then the rule is, leyatza ben chayrin. The slave doesn't go free. Because there's a concern that maybe included in that was the slave himself, that he didn't give the. You see, how does the slave go free? He goes free by the owner saying that you now own yourself. But because he's leaving over some possessions from giving to the slave, so there's a possibility that maybe he's leaving over also the slave aspect.
We have to say specifically, I'm emancipating the slave.
No, he's just giving it. He doesn't say I'm emancipating you. He's saying I'm giving you everything, except. He said except. We don't know what else is in that except. I mean, we know one thing. Maybe there's also more that he's leaving out. Well, Reb Shimon says, La'ilamu ben chayrin. You see, want to go back to that case. The fact that he's not telling him exactly what area he's leaving out. Let's see this in the next opinion. Reb Shimon's view is he has to actually say that I'm leaving over 1/10,000th of my possessions. And he doesn't say what exactly from the 1/10,000th. Now, what Reb Shimon is saying is that if he would say something like that then what he's possibly saying is that the slave himself is the one item that was not being given to the slave.
Oh, wow.
So So the slave doesn't go free. But any other case, if he says, except for one piece of property, so then Reb Shimon holds that we're able to divide up the words and we're able to say that since I know you can't take any property because we don't know which property is the one that was left in the master's possession. You can't take that. But so what? You still you still have yourself. So you go free, and the property stays by the master. So Reb Shimon holds that theoretically there are possibilities of Palgin and Dibura, of dividing up the statements of the master, where the slave will go free and the property will stay by the master. Now,
It's a Jewish slave or non-Jewish?
it's a non-Jewish slave. Yeah. Yeah. So he's telling what Rabada Bar Masa is telling Rava is that you're going to follow the view of Reb Shimon. If it's a Jewish slave, the Jewish slave doesn't acquire. A Jewish slave can have his own ownership. I think it's really, when the Jewish slave acquires something, does it go automatically to the master? I don't think so. I think he's more like a lease than owned. The Jewish slave goes free differently anyway. Goes free after 6 years. He has to pay himself. Well, he could pay his freedom. If he could pay his freedom, that means that the master could set him free at any time. Also, I forgive the. Right. Well, now it says Amar Rav Yosef. The problem is Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi Amar Rav Nachman Afal Pisha Kilas Rav Yosef Reb Shimon. Even though Rav Yosef praised the words of Reb Shimon that he spoke about Palgin and Dibura dividing up the statement, that we can accept half of it, which half? The half that the slave goes free. Even though he said that, wow, that's very interesting, that's very nice, such good words. However, the rule is not like Reb Shimon. The rule is halachic Reb Meir. The rule is still like Reb Meir. The Tanya, that it was taught in a brisa. Brisa says that when this statement, this Mishnah was said in front of Reb Yossi, Reb Yossi said, Reb Yossi is Reb Yossi ben Chalafta. He said the following pasuk: Yushak Meshiv Dvarim Nechaichem. The lips kiss. Someone that says correct words. That's an expression. It means that it's so beautiful. The lips kissed there, right? Right. Right. Someone that says something so nice, the lips kiss, but nevertheless, even though it sounded so nice, but that's not the halacha. Okay. Now the Gemara challenges this question. We have a question on Rava. Rava says Palgin and Dibura seems to be following Reb Shimon, but Reb Nachman says that we don't go like Reb Shimon, we go like Reb Meir.
Right.
Reb Meir was the first opinion, which said that we do not set the slave free. We don't divide up the statements. Does Rav Nachman really say this? But we have another statement from Rav Nachman that says, let's say there's someone on his deathbed. On his deathbed, the rule is that you don't need a kinyan. You don't need a manner of acquisition. The person just says, I want this to go to this person, this to go. It's as if the acquisition was done, because he's on his deathbed. They instituted that it should be able to be given immediately, so it shouldn't be tormented. That is it really going to be fulfilled or not? So he writes all his possessions over to his slave. But Ahmad, then he gets better. Now, what does he want? Everyone wants everything back. He only gave it to him. He thought he was dying. So Chayzer ben Achasim, he's actually allowed to retract and take back all his possessions. But he can't take the slave back. Because the slave is already free. Chayzer ben Achasim, how does he go back by the possessions? You see, how did the slave go free? Because the master gave him all his possessions. Included in all of those possessions is also the slave. So he gains his own independence. Even the slave. Okay.
Yeah, but that's different.
That's where he said. That's where he said only, right? Okay, so this would be in the regular case where shchiv mira means ill. Shchiv mira means laying ill. Marin bishan means bad. Means bad illnesses. Bishan means bad. Marin. But marin means ill in Aramaic. Sounds like bad, but it really means ill. Well, he's able to retract from the possessions and take them back because that's a gift of a shchiv of someone that's laying ill. So the rule is someone that's laying ill, if he gives all his possessions, then it's implied that he thinks that he's not recovering. So that's why he gave everything. If he would have given part of his possessions, then it gets more complicated, because then we think that maybe he was planning that even if he comes back, he wants to save something just in case. So it looks like this is a gift besides for him not recovering. But here he gave all his possessions. So then that's the rule of the matna shchiv mira, the gift of the person that's dying, that he's allowed to retract if he recovers. But he can't retract by the slave because he's already free. The slave went free. How does he get him back? He has the name of a free person. Now, what we're seeing from Reb Nachman is that we do accept Palgin and Dibura. In one statement where he says, all my possessions are acquired to you, we trust it, we accept half of it. That means the slave acquires himself. We don't accept the other half, where all the possessions are acquired. So Reb Nachman really does hold up Palgin and Dibura. So why did Reb Nachman say before that we don't pass like Reb Shimon that holds up Palgin and Dibura? We only go like Reb Meir that says we don't do Palgin and Dibura. When here we say Palgin and Dibura.
Is Yitzi online or no?
Yes, it's online. Yeah.
Ask him if this is the difference between a irrevocable trust and a revocable trust, because that's what it sounds like.
Yitzi, do you follow that? Is this a revocable versus an irrevocable trust? 1 second, I don't hear you.
Is he really listening, or he just
No, he's just turned on the camera, but not the microphone. Yeah, on mute. We can't hear. Okay, whatever.
eventually.
So the Gemara is going to say, actually, really, Reb Nachman holds of Palgin and Dibura. So why did we say before that he doesn't have Palgin and Dibura? Where there was a piece of property which we didn't know which one it was, and so we didn't know if maybe the slave was included in that or not. Why don't we just say that the slave was, in that case, we could have followed Reb Shimon, we say the slave is redeemed. The slave is freed. It's just the property that's not. We could have divided it up. Elam Ravashi Hasamayna Taima Mishum Delav Krus Gitahu. You see, when it comes to a get needs to be 100%. Since there's a possibility that maybe he did not set the slave free, so he holds that the slave is not free at all because of that percent chance that maybe the slave isn't free. So then we can't say the slave is free at all. So in the case where we know he wants to set the slave free, there's no question about that. And the only problem is, do we trust it? Can we divide this up? Can we say the slave is free and the possessions are not going to the slave? Then we will divide it up. Rav Nachman holds up Palgin and Dibura. It's only when there's a doubt about if the slave is free or not, then we can't say that the slave is free, because it's not 100% severed from the master. Where do we learn this from? By a divorce. Divorce needs to be 100%. The man can't divorce his wife with certain conditions still there. I'm divorcing you, but you can't marry so and so. I'm divorcing. The divorce needs to be if she's divorced, then you have no say on this, right? I'm divorcing you, but you can't visit your parents or something. The divorce needs to be 100%. Okay, so the same thing as at a divorce, the same thing applies to a get. Okay, now back to the Mishnah. We said if someone contests, talking about in Israel, someone contests the validity of the document, where we did not need to say, right? We just trusted. We say that the document is good, and if we ever have a problem, we'll get witnesses. So, what is the problem that you're talking about? If you have contesters to the document, then we'll have to validate the witnesses. We'll look at the signatures. We'll see, does anyone here recognize these signatures? If someone here recognizes the signatures, we'll say the document's good. It says, Irakama, how many people do you consider to be contesting the document? It says, if you say one person shows up, it says, we don't trust the document. It says, well, Rabbi Yochanan says that doesn't work. You can't just have just one person in these matters. You say, well, it's just Lashon Hara. You can't believe one person is nothing. It must mean that we're talking about two people. The problem is, if it's two people that come and say the document's not good, so what are we going to do? We're going to go get two people to say the document is good. So it's trey or trey, That's just going to be 2 against 2. So my chazas desam chasani smeichani. Why are you saying that the document is now good because you got 2 people? We have 2 people that say it's not good. And what you would do in that case is you would have trey or trey. Trey in Aramaic means 2. In Latin it sounds like 3, but in Aramaic trey means 2 because the tough is a shin. But that was just trey. Whatever the case is, it's 2 against 2. And what you would do in a case of 2 against 2 is we would just put it on its presumed status. And our presumed status here is that the woman is married because she was married in the past. So when you would have 2 against 2, we would say she's still married. So what does it help for you to validate the document, to take off the people that contested the document? You're just getting 2 other people. So it's now 2 against 2. They cancel each other out. She's still married. The Gemara says that's not what we're talking about. What our concern is that the husband may come and contest. And the husband's contest, we would actually trust unless we would validate it. It's not just the regular person. The husband says that I never divorced her. Or the document is a forgery or something, or the document is invalid. The husband would contest. So we would need to validate the document that's by looking at the signatures and saying that these are valid signatures. We recognize the signatures, and then we would make it good. It would be 2 against 1. Okay. We have now a new Mishnah. This Mishnah was quoted in passing, and then the Gemara is going to, in passing, we already explained what the Mishnah meant. The Gemara is going to explain it again. Maybe get me Medina Sayam. Someone brings a get from overseas. He's not able to say, in front of me, it was written, in front of me, it was signed. He's not able to say that. The Gemara is going to discuss why not. We already learned this in passing, but if there's witnesses that signed on it, so don't worry about the fact that the messenger can't make the declaration that he was there at the writing and the signing. What do? You just validate the signatures by finding other people that recognize those signatures, and then we say that the document is good. So we can trust this document if we have people that recognize the signatures. In those days, I assume that it wasn't, like today, you hear a singer, but you say, I recognize the voice. You know what that is? That's Affenfried. You recognize it. So in those days, they didn't have, not everyone was like signing documents. They had people that signed documents. You would look at it, you would say, I recognize that signature. Like an artist, you could see, even if you don't see the name on the bottom, you see the picture. I know who that is. That's whatever, Shgal. You can recognize the signature.
Well, only if you know it's signature.
John Hancock had a signature declaration. Maybe you see it.
You
It's
know,
a big
right on.
insurance company.
Uh-huh.
They use that signature as their logo.
And we use it as a saying, that's my John
Yeah.
Hancock,
Yeah.
meaning that's my recognizable signature. That's how far.
Uh-huh. So it was possible that people like today would say, would you recognize my signature? You wouldn't recognize my
saw it.
signature. You
No,
never
it's a
saw it.
mess. Usually
How would you
it's
even know
it's
the person's signature?
unrecognizable.
But in those days, I think signatures were recognizable. So like a piece of art. Especially, they probably had certain scribes that worked for the court. People would they recognize the document. So you would have to find someone that recognizes signatures. Echad Gittin Nashim. Okay, now we have a new piece of the Mishnah. Whether it's a divorce from a marriage, Gittin Nashim. Echad Shechur Avadim, or whether it's a deed of manumission, a document that sets the slave free. Shavu, they're equal. They have the same halacha l'meilach l'mevi for bringing and delivering.
Quick question. It said in the commentary here, when you don't have the but even if the husband doesn't contest it, it's still invalid.
Right.
Why is that?
That's
The husband
because-
comes by. and
That's because the
doesn't say a
get
word.
the
Why
get-
isn't shtika done?
no, because the get is coming from overseas. The rule is that declaration is part of the process of the get. You can't alter the process of the get. So that declaration is very important. Now, if you're not able to do that declaration, you can still validate it another way. There still is another chance. But without anything, we don't accept it.
But why is it that if the husband himself shows up, who's the one who gave
Oh,
the get
if
and
the
doesn't
husband
say
said-
anything?
No, that's because the husband didn't say anything. If the husband says it's good, then that would be good.
But why isn't the Katsavish not saying anything means he agrees? He didn't contest the get, and yet we're saying he shows up, doesn't say a word, we still don't accept the get. I would think he'd say, no, I never wrote this get. It's
Uh-huh.
good."
Speechless.
No, that's late in the
I'm not
Gemara.
sure.
It comes to Chayrish.
Not sure. But he should know. Oh, I mean, he doesn't know that. Yeah, maybe they can ask him.
I don't know,
No.
Just a
Okay.
question.
Now the Mishnah says, this is one of the ways that there's a comparison between a get, a woman's divorce, and the deed of manumission, the document of the slave. What is that? That they're equal to delivering the get, that you have to say b'fani nechta b'fani nechta. Okay, we're going to see a brisa that says there's 3 ways or 4 ways that they're similar, 3 or 4 comparisons. Back in the beginning of the Mishnah, we said that the person is not able to say that why? What does it mean he's not able to say? Why can't he say it? Maybe you'll say that he's a deaf mute. Can you even use him to deliver a document? But the Mishnah says you can't use a deaf mute to deliver a document because we don't accept that they have their intelligence is all there. Talking about that he was never able to learn, never able to communicate. Not that he went. Right. Before Helen Keller. So it's like Helen Keller as a child. You remember eating off the table. What was the name of that? The lady, the teacher. What was it? There was a famous film. You're supposed to know this.
Helen Keller.
Yeah. What was the name of
teacher's
that?
name.
What was the name of the teacher? Okay. So anyway, so we don't accept his intelligence, that he has all the that full capacity to be able to do that. Well, so he can't be a messenger at all. Forget about that. He can't say.
And so
Yes, Sullivan. Forget about that. We can't say that the guy can't say that it was written and signed in front of me. He can't even bring the get. Well, come up with a solution. We say that when he brought the get, he was actually not deaf and dumb. He was perfectly fine. All of a sudden, he approaches the woman. He's about to hand it to her. He's say the statement. He goes, he's shocked from what he sees. He went deaf and dumb, and he can't say anything. So we say, you can't say it. You can't make the statement. Okay, but the get was already brought. So he was fine as a shliach. He's just not good at saying the statement. So we say, okay, we'll validate the signature. It doesn't matter. It says whether it's this or that, they're comparable when it comes to delivering the get, that you have to make the statement. There's three ways of three comparisons between a divorce and freeing the slave. First one is what we mentioned in the Mishnah, maybe that they're equal in regards to bringing the get, which means that you need to say, in front of me it was written, in front of me it was signed, and we're able to accept that as a valid document. Any document, over here the word get means document. Any document that there's a kuti signature on it, a kuti witness, Samaritan, it's not accepted. Except for these two, which for some reason we're going to accept their signatures on a divorce, and we'll accept their signature also on a freeing a slave. In all non-Jewish courts, documents that are coming from non-Jewish courts, talking about monetary documents. Any monetary document that comes from a non-Jewish court, we say is acceptable, because they have laws that with borrowing and selling and whatever documents there are. Except but we don't accept the divorce documents that come from court. We don't accept the freeing of the slaves, because those are compared one to another. So basically, we have three comparisons here. First one was fanei nechtav. Second one is that a witness that's a kuti is valid, and the third one is that a witness of a kuti is valid on a get and it's invalid on all other documents. We don't trust them. We think they're dishonest, but on the get we will trust it. And then if it comes from a non-Jewish court, so it's invalid on a get and valid on other documents. Yeah. And when it comes to, if you want to say, according to Reb Meir's opinion, we actually have a fourth comparison. What's the fourth comparison? It goes like this. There's a discussion in the Gemara. I think it's coming up like on the next page. No, and there's a discussion that comes up shortly about is it considered? Yeah, it's on Daf Yud Aleph. If you hand the document over to someone, like give this to or acquire this on behalf of, and so if you give a divorce,
is it accepted at the moment of the
yeah. So, but over here the question is, there's a nuance here that if it would be a merit only for the benefit of the recipient, then someone else can acquire it on their behalf. But if there's some sort of detriment for the recipient, then it's only going to happen until the person acquires it. So that would be there's a discussion about this in the Mishnah later. Exactly. So Reb Meir says that both of these is a chayv, and therefore, if the person gives it to someone else to acquire it on their behalf and to bring it to them, so we say that it's not a done deal until it reaches them. And if the person didn't reach them yet, he can retract and say, give it back, and he can take it back. So you see, there's another comparison of a get and a freedom, and then eved, freeing and the eved. Okay. No, the witness, we can accept a Samaritan witness. Yeah. Gemara says, Bishlem Rabbanan, we understand what the Rabbanan mean, why the Rabbanan give us a number, Minyana Lamuti Ad Rameir, because they say three things because they want to exclude what Rameir says, which is a fourth thing. Elul Rab Meir, Minyana Lamuti Mai, but what is Rab Meir saying for? For who's he coming to exclude? Usually when you have a number, you say it's only this. Who's he coming to exclude? It says Lamuti Ad Tanya is coming to exclude the following opinion. It's taught, Eidim Shein Yedim Lachtaim, witnesses that don't know how to sign, you can't sign the name. So what do? You make a stencil. You make a stencil, and then they fill it in. That would be the signature.
It's like when they used to teach cursive, so you'd have that dotted line.
Yeah, the dotted line. Yeah, exactly. The first time that I signed on, the rabbi gave me a little sticker under it, like a sticky note, put it under with how I should write it, and then right above it, I wrote. He didn't cut out the thing. He didn't, make that the ink should fill in the thing. He just basically trace it, but from above, just do exactly. Okay. So you basically help them. You help them write it. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, that's only by a divorce of a woman. And when it comes to freeing a slave and all other documents, only if they know how to read and sign, otherwise they don't sign. Gemara says, what happened over here with the reading? No one mentioned reading. Who said that, who mentioned reading? Remember, this kid comes home from school, he has this paper all scribbled up. And the mother says, what is this? He says, look, we learned how to write. So what does it say? So the students said, I don't know, we learn how to read tomorrow. Okay, so who mentioned the reading over here? We're only talking about signing. The Gemara says, what it means is like this. They don't know how to read, and fine. You could read it to them, and then they'll sign. You have to read the document before you sign it. But if they don't know how to sign, then makarim lehem, then we can help them sign. That's only by other documents. So, but according to the first opinion here, though, there's a comparison with Gittin Nashim and other documents. We would accept the stencil, the Gittin Nashim and Shechuri Abad. We would accept the stencil. Is this in Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? No. Let's see what they say. So what he means to say is that not that he's accepting Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that we don't have a comparison between. There's only four things that they're compared, but not when it comes to tracing. It's only by the get. Only by the get will allow the tracing, but not by other documents. Yeah, not the freedom document, and that's what he means. Okay, let's leave the Gemara over here. It's Hashem tonight. We'll learn at 2:30 a.m.
What a way to get us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Have a good Yom Tov.
Good Yom Tov, everyone.
Good Yom Tov.